For the last 3 years, I host a syndicated radio show. 5 days a week, I go live in 40 cities, and I talk to men and women across America who feel stuck.
For years, Mel Robbins has built a reputation as one of the most trusted voices in personal development, inspiring millions to take control of their lives and push past self-doubt. But lately, troubling signs have begun to emerge, and many are starting to wonder if something has changed. From growing criticism to unexpected controversies and questions that refuse to go away, the picture is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. But are these merely temporary setbacks? Or is there a much bigger problem unfolding behind the scenes? The answer may surprise you. The pain behind success stories. In one of the episodes of her podcast, Mel Robbins opens up about a year that quietly broke her down in ways most people never saw. On the surface, her life still looked successful. She had influence, visibility, and a growing career. But behind that public image, she was going through one of the hardest seasons of her life, filled with burnout, deep loneliness, emotional exhaustion, betrayal, and major personal changes she was not ready for. She explains that during that time, her life felt like it was falling apart in slow motion. She was often separated from her husband and son for long periods, which left her feeling disconnected from her own family. At work, she was overwhelmed by pressure and responsibility, trying to keep everything running while she herself was running empty. Then came another painful layer. She experienced betrayal from someone she trusted in her professional life. That loss of trust made everything feel even heavier. Over time, the stress began to affect her health. She felt constantly tired, mentally drained, and emotionally numb. Even when she kept pushing forward, something inside her kept whispering that the way she was living no longer matched what she truly valued. Life, in her words, had become full of tension she could not ignore anymore. A turning point came when a close friend spoke to her honestly and directly. Instead of comforting her with easy words, the friend challenged her to face the truth. She had been tolerating unhappiness for too long. That conversation forced her to reflect deeply on what was really going wrong. She began to notice patterns, repeated frustrations, disappointments, and emotional struggles that she now calls friction. To her, friction is not random. It is a signal. It shows where life is out of balance and where change is needed. One of her most important realizations was that many excuses people give themselves are not real barriers, but hidden fears. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, and fear of not being enough had quietly shaped many of her decisions. For years, she postponed things she truly wanted to do, including starting her podcast, because she felt she was not ready or good enough. Eventually, she reached a point where waiting no longer made sense. She chose action over fear, even without perfect conditions. That decision became a turning point. Looking back, Robbins explains that growth often begins in painful seasons. By removing toxic patterns, seeking help through therapy, making difficult but honest choices, and facing what she had been avoiding, she slowly rebuilt her life. Her message is simple but powerful. Difficult seasons are not just problems to survive. They can become moments that push us to realign our lives, understand ourselves better, and transform into something stronger and more honest. But who is Mel Robbins? What does she represent? Let's delve into the details of the woman who promised to change your life. The rise behind the persona. For millions of people around the world, Mel Robbins is more than an author or podcast host. She is a symbol of possibility. Her message is simple, confident, and incredibly appealing. You are not stuck because life is impossible. You are stuck because you hesitate, you overthink, you doubt yourself, you allow fear to make your decisions. And if you could just push through those mental barriers, everything could change. That message transformed Mel Robbins into one of the biggest names in modern self-help. Today, she commands enormous audiences. Her books sell in the millions. Her podcast regularly ranks among the most listened to in America. Her videos generate hundreds of millions of views. Major corporations pay huge sums to hear her speak. In 2026, she was recognized among the most influential women in media and personal development. To her supporters, Mel represents something rare. She appears honest. She talks openly about her mistakes. She shares stories of anxiety, failure, marital struggles, financial stress, and personal insecurity. Unlike many motivational figures who present themselves as flawless success stories, Mel built her reputation on being relatable. But as her influence expanded, so did the scrutiny. The bigger her platform became, the more people started asking difficult questions. Was the public getting the full story? Were some parts of her personal narrative being carefully shaped to fit a motivational brand? Did her advice truly account for the realities faced by ordinary people? And perhaps most importantly, were some of the ideas that made her famous actually her own? These questions have followed Mel Robbins throughout her rise to self-help superstardom, creating a fascinating contrast between the image that millions admire and the criticisms that continue to grow louder. To understand why, we have to go back to the beginning. Long before she became Mel Robbins' motivational icon, she was Melanie Lee Schneeberger. Born in Kansas City, Missouri, and raised largely in Michigan, Mel grew up in a family that valued education, hard work, and achievement. Her father eventually became a successful orthopedic surgeon. Her mother balanced raising children while working to support the family. As the years passed, the family's financial situation improved significantly, allowing them to enjoy a comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle. This detail would later become important. Throughout her career, Mel often emphasized resilience and overcoming obstacles. Critics would later argue that some of her storytelling created the impression that she had risen from far more difficult circumstances than the reality suggested. Whether fair or unfair, those criticisms became part of a larger conversation about privilege, opportunity, and who gets to tell the world's most inspiring success stories. Still, nobody disputes one thing. Mel was ambitious. She excelled academically, earned admission to Dartmouth College, and later attended Boston College Law School. On paper, her future looked almost guaranteed. Elite education, a law degree, a promising career, a bright future. Yet, appearances can be deceiving. Years later, Mel would reveal that behind those achievements was a young woman battling anxiety, insecurity, self-destructive habits, and deep uncertainty about her future. Those struggles would eventually become the foundation of an empire. So, was Mel Robbins successful from the beginning? What inspired the drive to growing into a self-help guru? Let's dive into the details of the crises that created a global brand. The birth of the 5-second rule. Every self-help expert has a beginning story, but some of these stories are not born from success. They are born from struggle, pressure, and breaking points. For Mel Robbins, her story began in one of the most difficult seasons of her life. After finishing law school, she stepped into a legal career and married Christopher Robbins. Together, they started building what looked like a strong and promising life. They bought a large farmhouse, started raising children, and chased big career goals. From the outside, it looked like everything was working. It looked like they had made it. But behind that picture, life was becoming heavier. After the birth of her first child, Mel went through severe postpartum depression. It was not a small emotional dip. It was a deep struggle that affected her energy, her thinking, and her sense of control. Over time, instead of getting easier, life brought more pressure. Then came another major shock. Chris lost his corporate job. Instead of quickly finding another stable role, he decided to take a huge risk and start a restaurant business. It was a bold dream, but the timing was extremely difficult. The United States was entering a serious financial crisis, one of the worst in modern history. Across the country, businesses were collapsing, families were losing homes, and debt was rising sharply. Mel later shared that her own family was trapped in nearly $800,000 of debt. The pressure became constant and suffocating. She described waking up each day with intense anxiety. Simple mornings felt heavy. She feared losing her house. She feared losing her marriage. She feared losing the entire life they had worked for. To cope with the emotional weight, she turned to alcohol, which only made things more complicated. Her relationship with Chris became strained. Their home, once filled with hope, now felt like a space filled with tension and uncertainty. At that point, the future did not look inspiring at all. It looked fragile. Then came the turning point that would later reshape her entire life. One morning, she found herself lying in bed, unable to move. She knew what needed to be done. She knew responsibilities were waiting, but fear, exhaustion, and emotional heaviness felt stronger than her will. In that moment, she did something simple but powerful. She counted down in her mind, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and she forced herself to move. That small act became the foundation of what she later called the 5-second rule. Years later, she turned this personal breakthrough into a TEDx talk. What followed surprised even her. The video spread rapidly across the world. Millions of people watched it, shared it, and connected deeply with it. The idea was powerful because it was simple. No complex system, no expensive program, no technical psychology, just a 5-second countdown that interrupts fear and pushes action. People began using it in everyday life, making difficult phone calls, starting delayed projects, getting out of bed earlier, and taking small but meaningful steps forward. Over time, the 5-second rule grew beyond a talk. It became a global tool for action, and Mel Robbins became one of its most recognized voices. But could the simple 5 seconds rule be Mel Robbins' game changer? How did her brand emerge afterwards? Let's dig into the details of the rise of Mel Robbins' empire. The rise of a self-help empire. Following her viral TEDx talk, Mel's career quickly rose into a completely new level. She was no longer seen as just a former lawyer testing out motivational speaking. Instead, she grew into a strong personal brand, recognized by people across many countries. New opportunities began to arrive one after another without slowing down. Book deals came in. Television shows started inviting her regularly. Big speaking events were lined up across stages and conferences. With every success she achieved, her audience kept expanding and becoming more loyal. Her message spread widely, reaching more people than ever before. She no longer spoke like an academic or sounded like a therapist. Instead, she used a simple, direct, and relatable style, almost like a friend giving honest advice. Her communication was fast, clear, and focused on action. Many people were drawn to this approach because it felt easy to understand and apply in real life. In a world filled with complex ideas and overthinking, her voice felt like a breath of fresh air. She often gave simple solutions. When overwhelmed, do a quick mental reset. When stuck, take one small immediate step. When afraid, act before doubt grows. This simplicity became her strength, but it also became a point of debate among critics. Critics argued that life is more complex than such simple advice suggests. They pointed out that not everyone can solve problems through motivation alone. A struggling single mother facing financial pressure, a worker trapped in a weak economy, or someone dealing with illness or discrimination may not be able to change their situation just by changing thoughts. These realities often require deeper and more practical support. This criticism was not only about Mel, but about the entire self-help industry. At its best, Self-help inspires people to take positive steps forward. At its worst, it can make people feel that every failure is their personal fault alone. This debate grew stronger as her influence continued to rise. She expanded into television programs, radio shows, online courses, and large speaking tours across the country. By then, she was no longer only giving advice. She was selling hope. Hope is one of the most powerful things people are willing to invest in emotionally and financially. Today, the self-help industry is worth billions because many people seek answers to life problems. They want confidence, direction, meaning, success, and emotional relief from their daily struggles and challenges. However, one major concern is that many people giving advice are not trained mental health professionals or therapists. Life coaching is loosely regulated, allowing almost anyone to become a coach, charge money, and present themselves as experts, raising concerns about ethics and responsibility toward vulnerable people today. With her growing fame, was she free from controversies? What controversial situations did she find herself in? Let's talk about the controversies that refuse to go away. Controversy around influence and ideas. Success often brings attention, and attention often brings questions. For Mel Robbins, that attention shifted into public scrutiny and debate. What began as admiration from many people turned into criticism from others who questioned her choices and associations. One major concern involved her participation in speaking events linked to multi-level marketing companies. These businesses, called MLMs, divide opinion strongly. Supporters see them as opportunities for ordinary people to build income and independence. Critics argue that many function like pyramid-style systems where only a small group benefits, while most participants struggle to earn a profit. Studies show that most people do not earn much income, and many lose money over time. Despite this, motivational speakers are often invited into these spaces. Their role is to encourage participants, build excitement, and keep belief alive. Critics say this encouragement can keep people committed to systems that may not be financially helpful long-term. When Mel Robbins accepted invitations to speak at such events, questions arose whether her message was empowering people or supporting systems critics see as harmful. Later, another controversy emerged around the "let them" theory. The idea was simple: if people want to leave, let them. If they judge you, let them. If they choose their path, let them. Instead of controlling others, focus on your own actions and peace of mind. The idea spread quickly across social media and became widely discussed, becoming one of her most known ideas. However, as its popularity grew, some pointed out similar ideas had already been shared online before she brought attention to them. This led to discussion about writer Cassie Phillips and viral poem "Let Them." People asked whether the idea was original, influenced, or part of a larger online conversation. Mel denied the poem inspired her work, but critics remained unconvinced. The situation became more complicated when she sought trademark protection for the phrase. Some felt this raised questions about ownership of ideas already widely shared publicly. Around the same time, discussion emerged about her daughter, Sawyer Robbins, said to have contributed to development of her ideas. While Mel mentioned this involvement, early publications did not highlight it clearly, and acknowledgments were updated after feedback. Taken separately, each issue might seem minor, but together, they formed a pattern critics found hard to ignore. In many ways, the situation shows how modern public figures are constantly judged through online conversations, where ideas spread fast and questions about truth and ownership become difficult to settle clearly or quickly in a lasting and meaningful way for audiences everywhere. What image does Mel Robbins represent in the global space? What are fans and critics saying about her? Let's take a look at the growing questions about Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins, influence and controversy. Today, Mel Robbins stands at the peak of her influence in the world of personal development. Her podcast sits near the top of global charts, reaching millions of listeners every week. Her books continue to appear on bestseller lists across many countries. Her social media presence keeps growing as new audiences discover her daily. New business projects and products are always being launched, adding to her expanding brand. Her audience is still massive and deeply engaged. Yet, alongside this success, questions continue to follow her. Some critics say her strongest skill is not teaching, but marketing. They point to her strong branding, emotional storytelling, and ability to turn simple ideas into global movements. Others raise a different concern. They say her message of personal responsibility can feel too simple for complex real-life struggles. Take action, she says. Stop excuses, she repeats. Move forward, she encourages. While these ideas inspire many, critics argue they may ignore deeper social and economic realities. Not everyone starts life with equal chances. Not everyone has the same support systems. For some, change is not just about motivation alone. At the same time, debates about originality and business practices continue to appear. Supporters see a different picture. Millions helped, habits changed, confidence built, and lives improved. This contrast makes her both admired and questioned, trusted and challenged. She stands at the center of a modern debate about success, influence, and responsibility. The truth may lie somewhere between praise and criticism. What remains clear is her wide reach and strong impact across the world. Few people have built such a powerful personal brand in modern self-help, and few remain so widely discussed for so long. The question now is what comes next for her growing influence? Will her reach continue to expand, or will rising criticism begin to shape how she is seen in the future? More people are now not only listening to her advice, but also asking deeper questions about her methods and message. This growing tension may become the defining part of her story going forward. What makes her story even more complex is how quickly her ideas spread across different platforms and cultures worldwide. Each short message, video, and quote is shared widely and often taken as a simple truth. Yet behind the simplicity, there is always a larger discussion about responsibility, privilege, and influence in modern life. Some say this debate will define her legacy more than any single success ever could in the end. Moving forward always. So, what do you think about Mel Robbins' behind-the-scenes stories? Do you think her experiences are necessary ingredients for her success? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.